I'm a producer, writer, been a musician in the pop world for years and years, but years ago started playing in different worship groups and recording on a lot of worship albums, and simultaneously was working on Helix and HX devices as a QA tester. So imagine a computer that can go full-scale audio. It's terrifying to be in QA for that. But eventually Yamaha bought Ampeg, and me being the Ampeg lover that I've been for years and years, jumped on that as quickly as I could, and now I create all the Ampeg products. So if you don't like anything, just don't tell me. It likes to bring a ton of different basses, and you want to just play different things, and you know, as a bass player, especially in worship, you are doing typically the most simplistic playing, but it is the most important playing. You're defining the chord. Even the register at which you're playing at is really important for where you are in the song, where the congregation is in terms of just visual feedback or how things are going, just the overall vibe. But I would say something that will sustain, for me, that's swamp ash, typically like a nice heavy body, and I typically go for a Fender American Deluxe 5-string, but in terms of action, that matters too. I've noticed like very low action doesn't, you know, you can dig in, you can shred all day, but you're not typically going to be doing that in a worship setting. And first and foremost, sustain, and then on top of that, there in the multiple bass choices, you know, there may be something that sounds incredible on its own, but it's kind of like an overall mix. Does it sound great with the band? Are you going to distract? Even in terms of the color of the bass, there have been days that I've brought, you know, candy apple red Fender Jaguar bass on stage, and then I see the video after, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you can't unsee that. Like you're trying to see the message, but you're actually just saying the bass, even when it's on a stand.
Yeah.
So even things down to that level. One day I brought a Hofner, which you know, any bassist like loves a Hofner, but it does that thing so well. But trying to use that with the pick, I thought like, yeah, I'm gonna bring the McCartney vibe to worship, and then my buddy was right in front of the house, like, dude, all I can hear is the attack of the strings, and it's so distracting. So just the things that seem pretty nuanced and seem like, yeah, I'm just playing bass, you know, I'll be in the background. It's like, no, you gotta really be intentional about it.
You touched on something that for guitar players is a little bit easier if you record the live stream, you can watch it back. As a bass player, how do you tell and how do you find out if your bass is working in the framework of both the live mix and the stream mix?
That's a great question. Be friends with any sound guy, any AV guy at a church. A lot of times I would try to, and it's another thing where you think, okay, well, this may be a little bit over the top, but if you have a wireless rig and you trust it, and you can kind of get out there, walk around the room, and just the nuances of the low end in your setup to really be able to walk out and kind of test that for yourself. Because, you know, the sound engineer is going to mix you in the way that they see fit, but typically you know your instrument really well, and you know how you're, even when you're feeling it on stage within the PA system, and being able to kind of tweak those things to not be overbearing.
All right. And since there are as many bass players as there are in the house, I'm going to kind of round out with one last question. How do you choose a string?
I feel like I typically go with New York XLs for bass strings. They're a little brighter than what most people would probably use for worship. But I've found that most of my flat wound basses, aside from one, doesn't have the sustain that I want for worship. So though it may not have that top end I feel like you can dial out the top end on a New York XL. But yeah, if you typically go with the flats, it's like a smoother, more mellow sound, which seems like it would work, but again, sustain for me is huge. So sometimes it doesn't cut it there.
Awesome.
I think for beginners and intermediate, it's hard to learn those things outside of experience. I think playing with as many people as you can all the time is huge, because you're getting to learn to listen to other people in the band and where your role is and where to step out. And then I also kind of want to call out the music directors too. It's in your job and in the best interest of the group to be very clear and direct and very enthusiastic in a positive way about who is the leader on any musical leader on any given section of the song. I think that's really important to just have everybody's expectations in the same place. And when you can do that, you can kind of call out and not only have the band support the beginner or an intermediate player to know that, okay, that person's they're new to the game, we're going to kind of support around and take the pressure off of them, keep their parts a little bit more minimal, step in where we can, and then know if there's, you know, a section where that person is stepping out, that the band's kind of backing out and stuff, and just basically kind of ushering them into the scene. I think that's really important. I think I've been really impressed with a lot of music directors I've worked with. I've had the opportunity of being the music director in worship, which I actually thought I was going to love and don't love, because there is a level of preparation that you have, especially playing bass, that it is insane. Like just to call out all the guitars here, you guys got it easy. Like,
y'all the real hero.
Hide behind the verb, hide behind the delay. The bassist has to know on note 1 or on beat 1, you know, where you're going to be, what that chord's going to be, on top of talking to the band, on top of rhythmically being tight with the drummer. So just a lot of prep, and I found myself, you know, patting my head and rubbing my tummy a little too much. You know, it's just like, oh my gosh, now I'm out of worship. So just personally, but I think a great MD really helps kind of tie in that whole group and really help younger players, or not younger players, but beginning players kind of get into the mix. I think too, like in terms of scheduling, if you have a well of great players and maybe somebody's always kind of like the lead, to switch it up a little bit, it keeps everybody interested. It kind of forces somebody to maybe expose and work on some weaknesses, and then you're just showing that person that maybe doesn't get the lead guitar, even though you can switch that up per song or whatever. But to just kind of change up that personnel a little bit in different configurations of the team, to where somebody's getting to feel like they're growing and having a more significant part maybe in the group than they typically did. I think maybe cycling that through is just kind of keeps people fresh. By the way, the first experience I ever had MDing for what is now called Church Home, City Church LA, in Beverly Hills, in this massive theater, and they didn't have the MD mic not pumped up. It was pumping out to the system as well.
No.
Okay, we're gonna come in right here. It's like the most delicate time. Oh man, I was like, welcome.
I think all MDs.
Yeah.
I think all MDs have had a time, because I know it's happened to me too.
Yeah.
Where like it's been in the house.
The best is when it's that, and then the feedback, from that.
It's like, don't make fun of anybody in the congregation as much as ever. You never know.
Check out that guy in the Hawaiian shirt.
Is that pink hair? What is this problem?
I think what you touched on with dynamics and not starting at 10 every time is a huge thing, especially with what you're typically playing in a worship setting with bass. So there were a lot of times after service, my wife would say, I didn't hear you at all. And I'm like, thank you. That's a huge compliment. I'm hoping you're just feeling it, not hearing it. And it's like choosing your fills wisely. I think that's another distinction between a beginner and an intermediate player and a pro is what they're not playing. I think that's hugely important. So yeah, it's like creating those holes and just really listening more than.
We all have to be very kind to the sound men, that we're around. You got to make sure that they're happy. So bring them coffee once in a while, or you won't be there. I'm not a mix engineer. I'm really a guitar player, but I'll say this for me, that all the sound thing. You got to really, less is more. You got to find the frequencies that the guitar is going to speak through, and a lot of times that becomes very narrow. You listen to early Hillsong stuff. That sound is Nigel Headroth running everything to a tube screamer. It's a mid-rangey overdrive going into a fairly mid-rangey bright AC30, going into darker delays that have no high end and a lot of mid-range. And he would run the DM2 into a deluxe memory min, right? Eighth in the dotted eighth. And that's that sound. That's the galloping on Desert Song. That's that galloping. That is like the machete of truth in a mix. It ain't subtle. It is just mid-range right in the middle, but it gave him a voice, And that voice is different than you hear out of Elevation. That voice is different than what we're hearing right now out of Hillsong. The Hillsong is a little more complicated, I think.